can't say that now.
Welcome to another episode of the Ultimate Client Strategy Podcast. I'm Lisa Rosenthal, and this is my co-founder and partner, Bruce Libman. And today we're joined by a colleague and longtime friend, Arthur Conte.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
We're glad
I know your story, and it's an amazing story, all right? So why don't we get a little deeper and explain to everybody, about Arthur, his firm, and how you got to where you are today.
I always tell people, Bruce, that a big part of the reason I started my own practice was because of you. And I mean that sincerely. And I'm not just saying that because we're on this podcast together, but I do tell people that a lot. But my story begins, if I can start anywhere, where I had been working as an attorney. So I practice in the areas of trust and estates and elder law. And I had been working at different law firms around Long Island doing trust and estates and or elder law work. And I was at my third or fourth stop when I had been introduced to Bruce, and it was with another attorney that did both trust and estates and elder law work. And, we had a conversation about joining the organization and becoming, just working together. And Bruce had a conversation with me and said, you really have an entrepreneurial spirit. You really have the savvy, the acumen to do business. You should think about going out on your own. And so I think that was the beginning of the end of 2017, beginning of 2018. And by June of that year, I had started out the law office of Arthur Conte, and I had a solo practice for about 3 years. And in the interim, I had met many colleagues and made many friends along the way. Thanks much in part to you guys. Thank you for that. And, I had been growing and learning how to practice as a business owner and, just as a lawyer. I hired as my first staff member during literally the middle of COVID. And I had gotten my first office 3 months before COVID, my first lease. So I went through it all. It was a very roller coaster ride, definitely a roller coaster ride for sure during that time period. But then I met an individual named Paul Hill, who also was a solo practicing attorney. He had been an attorney for a lot longer than I had and practiced the same area as I did. We became friends. And within 7 or 8 months after we had an initial conversation, we merged our practices and formed Hill Conte Law in the spring of 2021. And since then, we have grown to a staff of now almost 8, now 8 as of, I think next week, we will have a staff of 8. And, we have another attorney. We have 3 or 4, we have 5 support staff now, and 4 going on 5, hiring another support person. So it's really wonderful. And it's been a hell of a ride, to be honest. And I did not imagine my life would turn out this way when I first decided to go to law school, which was probably back in high school when I was doing speech and debate. And I was a speech and debate nerd through and through. And I went to college and I would study political science and philosophy. And I knew I was going to law school, and I went to law school. And if you asked me then what I would do with my law degree, I had no idea, and I fell into this area of practice because it's a helpful one. We're helping people, we're helping individuals and families get through sometimes the toughest part of anyone's life. And so it really spoke to me, and I fell in love with it. And I didn't think even at that point I would start my own practice, but definitely Bruce, that conversation we had, it was right around Christmas of 2017. And you said, what are you doing working for somebody else? And so I have you to thank for that.
I appreciate that.
Bruce, do you remember the day that Arthur came as a sole practitioner, like on his own? The very first meeting in Melville at Grant Thornton's offices.
Yep, that's right.
And you had been there before, but
right.
This day was special because you were there under your own shingle. And we asked you.
Started working out of his house. Okay.
Yes, but we asked him to stand up and introduce himself as him, right? Specifically under your own shingle.
Right.
I won't forget that morning. It was great.
Now that you bring it up, I do remember that. And I remember where I was sitting in the room, and wow. Yeah. It's interesting because I was mid-20s when I graduated law school, and I had zero aspirations. I literally mean zero of starting my own business. I was afraid. I was nervous. I didn't think I could do it. I had no idea how to do it. And what I what I did was I watched, and I watched how, fortunately and unfortunately, how not to run a law practice and run a business, and how to, the ins and outs of running a law firm and needing to get, knowing you need E&O insurance, and all that stuff. Like, you learn that as you go, and it's important to know that stuff too, because that let me hit the ground running, and I didn't waste a day. I literally started like Monday. I left the previous firm on a Thursday or a Friday, and I started Monday morning, and I had my first 2 appointments that day. So, and I had the bank account all set up and everything I was ready to go for months. It was definitely interesting. But I remember that. I remember feeling like, wow, I'm doing something and this is special. And I didn't know I wanted to do this, but now that I'm in it, this actually feels correct. I don't wake up and think about going to work. I wake up and think about doing what I do. This is my life's calling, passion, life's work, whatever you want to call it. I don't look at this as getting up and going to work every day, for sure.
And in the midst of all this, you got married
Mm.
and you've got 2 boys.
Yeah. So I started, like you said, I started my practice in my wife's apartment, which was like, I think 500 square feet, being as generous, with my little computer and printer. And within 2-3 years, we got married in 2019. We bought a house in 2020 during COVID, of course, to that summer. And then our first son, Jackson, was born in January of 2021. And now we have 2 boys. Logan was born in 2023. So yeah, no, I haven't stopped. Like, I merged my practice in 2020. I haven't stopped, and I don't know how to stop, trying to grow my business, grow who I am, and, improve. I don't know how to not do it at this point. I just keep going forward.
Don't do it. All right.
That's what an entrepreneur does, Arthur. It's ingrained in you, right? You wake up in the morning, you're like, this is me, this is what I do.
Right.
And what comes next? How do we improve upon what we're already doing, right? And tweaking. And, as entrepreneurs, we're problem solvers. We solve problems all day long. You're unique because in the work you do, you're solving other people's problems, right? You're helping other people feel secure. And, if they have challenges, you're helping them walk through those challenges and come up with the best, right, solution. But there's no reason to ever stop, like Bruce just said. You never stop as an entrepreneur.
I don't know how. When I started my business too, and again, this was, knowing the right people, and you guys having introduced me to other members of our organization, and like learning who was a good person this would be a good person to talk to, Arthur. I remember working with, for a technology company. I should have a phone system, and I should have them do my computers and have them do my networking and get a firewall and all those things. And I was barely making enough money to pay myself at the time when I got my office in 2020, or late 2019. But I said, you know what, I'm going to do this right, where instead of being retroactive in trying to fix problems as they come up, when you hire somebody and you have to get them another phone and get them an email and get them set up in your system, I was as proactive as I reasonably could be in setting up systems and procedures. And, I have a slew of, now when we hire somebody, I have an employee handbook that's automatically sent to them when they get onboarded, thanks to another member, and it's wonderful that I have all these people to thank and that help support me. But I knew I had to have it before I really needed it, because when I got to the point where we're at now, I am way too busy actually running the business and doing the business to run the background stuff to fix the computer. And I told you guys the other day, I could build a computer from scratch, but I don't have the time to do that for my own company anymore. I would never at this point. And that's something I definitely learned early on starting my own business, was you have to try and make sacrifices sometimes to set yourself up for future success. And it may seem like I'm spending money that I don't need to spend on this service and paying somebody else to do something for me, but in a year or two, I'm going to need it. And it's hard to have that foresight, because it may be years before you need that. But when you need it and then it's set up, it really makes it a lot easier to keep growing.
I think the uniqueness is in what you do is not only are you an attorney, but you realize that you're a business owner. And so many professionals don't consider themselves business owners. They consider themselves lawyers. They consider themselves accountants and so forth and so on, and they're good at their skill set. But you are not only an attorney, you are a business owner.
Right.
Right.
Like, and it's, I'm a cheesy jargon, business jargon, but I'm a solutions provider. Like, I always look at, like, when I talk to a client, when they come in for a consultation, when they get me on the phone for 5 minutes before that, even, my first question is always, what are you worried about? What is it that brought you to calling a law firm for your estate planning, or for, elder law needs for your loved ones with Medicaid or nursing homes or long-term care issues or probate for estate work? What is it that you're worried about? Let me see if I can give you the answers and the help that you need, not only to just solve that problem, but feel better, feel at ease, limit, like, assuage the anxiety, and really mitigate those fears, because that's what it means to do the work of the attorney. And then I realized, as the business owner, I hire my employees. They are helping me at the end of the day. I am here to serve them, because they being here every day and putting their trust in me to follow my lead and follow Paul's lead. We're grateful for that. And we have to constantly be grateful for that, because they don't have to be here. They could go somewhere else and do their good work somewhere else. And so that's my mental perspective. Every day I walk in, I'm like, thank you for being here. And what can I do for you to make your life better? Thanks for, we have to do this today. Okay, we'll get through our tasks for the day, but what can I do for you? Do you need something? And that's always going to be my attitude, because it has to be.
That came from the experiences that you had with the 4 and 5 firms that you worked in,
Right.
because you wanted your own culture. You saw the culture that was there. You didn't want to bring that culture with you. All right. So you developed your own culture. All right. And that's a credit to you to see that it's a nice firm. I could never work like that. I have to create my culture. All right. The Hill Conte culture. All right.
Yeah.
And I think
it's interesting, because Paul too had that history, and I don't speak for him per se, but I know where he came from and his experience, and he was a partner at a larger firm and had the same kind of experience as I did, where the people in charge don't know how to treat employees, don't know how to treat clients sometimes, where there's just a bad attitude, or it's the mentality is, it's never what can I give, it's what can I get. And I always saw, like, that was the root problem in almost all of the issues any of the firms I worked at had, and where they all hit ceilings from a financial perspective of what they would make in revenue and growth. Why? Because they stayed status quo. They didn't try to grow, and when they did, they weren't treating the employees correctly, so they couldn't grow and have more people to trust, and their turnover was always high. And whether it was they didn't pay enough, or they didn't teach, or they didn't fire people that deserve to be fired, or they talked to I had one guy I worked for that he talked down to clients like they were children in a classroom. And I'm like, what? They're paying you thousands of dollars. Like, you have some respect. My God. Like, it was bizarre. So it was really eye-opening, all of those. And it was all different issues, and it was all different experiences. And it was, okay, after the 5th verb, I was like, I know what I don't want to do. That was the driving force. I said, I can't work for somebody else anymore, because I need to have my own thumbprint on this. Otherwise, I'm never going to be passionate about it. I'm never going to invest 100%. I'm never going to be able to give my all, because I'm making somebody else rich, number one, if I was. And even if I wasn't, I was putting my blood, sweat, and tears into somebody else's life. And I always cared, but it didn't change the way I just couldn't believe in it. And then that's me. I couldn't believe in their philosophy, and maybe it's right or wrong, doesn't matter. I couldn't believe in it, so I couldn't do it anymore.
Right.
And I think that's the key for most people when they think about, should I go out on my own, become an entrepreneur? It's not just, hey, I know how to network. Hey, I know how to form relationships with other strategic partners and other professionals in my industry, and we can refer clients to one another. I mean, that's a necessary component, sure. But it's also just understanding, like, how do I put my own unique perspective and thumbprint and philosophy into a business, and, like, who is that going to fit and who's that not going to fit, and knowing that, and embracing and saying, I'm not for everybody. I'm not going to survive every single person that walks through the door. I can say no. And you always say, Bruce, is like, what's your unique value proposition, and we're not for everybody. And it's really, really true.
It's the
It
truth.
ultimately, you have to know yourself, and yeah, it takes some reflection and, self introspection. But at the end of the day, when you realize what you are and what you aren't, it makes it a lot easier to be successful. Because then I have friends that are attorneys that do what I do in the area of Long Island and in other parts of New York State. I refer them business all the time. Why? Because I'm not at a 27 100 employee law firm in Manhattan, and I'm not a one-man band anymore who's going to give the say, who's going to be really less expensive. I'm neither of those things now, so I have to have those kinds of people to serve some of the people that walk through the door, because that's what they need.
So Arthur, what are some of the things, because we've known you, as you've shared now, from the beginning.
Long time.
And it's always a pleasure. And the most pleasurable part for me is always when we get feedback on the work any of our people do for someone. And the feedback on you has always been exceptional, and people truly feel cared for. Like they feel like you listened and you heard them and you did exactly what was necessary to protect their families. So
I don't know how else to function. I mean, I thank you. I appreciate that from everybody, but I don't know. I just don't know how else to do what I do. So I can't imagine being a good lawyer and not listening to your clients. Like, hello?
Well, I think that there are some that clients are unrealistic. They have unrealistic expectations, particularly in other areas of law. When it comes to trust and estate and elder law, I think it's a little bit different. I know a lot of attorneys who practice in your field who used to be litigators or corporate attorneys or practice
Right.
other kinds of law and just either had a personal experience, in their own family where they couldn't believe what was happening, right? And they were able to work it out for their own family, and then thought, wow, if it was this hard for me as an attorney to get these things done, imagine your average person. So I know several attorneys who have left other areas of law to practice in your area, and it's usually because they have the same heart you do and they're interested in making a difference. But there are plenty of areas of law where clients are unrealistic. And
Well, I get that too sometimes. I
yeah,
get the people that, they walk in and they say, my favorite thing is when clients walk in and say, I'm about to go through bankruptcy. Can I put everything in a trust and save it? And it's like, no, and I have no problem telling, sorry, that's not possible. And the customer is not always right, and that is an attitude you have to sometimes in my business have. You have to kind of gently let them down gently and say, I don't think that's going to work.
right. So in addition to you being so passionate about the law, protecting your clients and working with families to ensure that, their loved ones are protected and cared for, what are some of the things you love to do? What are some of the things outside of work that you find?
Outside of work?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I mentioned one thing before about computers. I am a big tech nerd, but I'm big into golf. I try to play golf at least, now between April and October, try to play at least, once or twice a month. It's just a goal just to get outside. It's good exercise for me. It's one of the few outdoor physical activities that I don't mind doing and doesn't feel like working out or sweating or anything. My wife and I have started to plan a lot of road trips, and because we used to before we got married and before we had kids, especially, we were big up in road trippers up and down New York State, tri-state area, even Vermont. She was a big skier, so she just loved to go to just even drive by a mountain, like not even go skiing. She was like, I just love to be in that environment. So I'm a big explorer. Like I love it. I love getting in the car. I'll drive 10 hours in the car anywhere. I love it. I don't care. I'm a big boater. My family we live on an island, and so I love to be on the water, go fishing, do anything. Just being out on the ocean or on the bay that is my calming, happy place. If I have one, that is the one place I always can guarantee to be able to calm down, separate myself, get away from it all, empty the mind, whatever Zen I need to find. That's my happy place for sure.
That's great. They say the best place to make decisions is outside.
It is. It is. We take the kids for walks in the wagon and just around the neighborhood, and that's when me and Kristen get all of our important decisions done between the hours of like 5:30 and 7 o'clock on those walks. So wintertime is hard because you're stuck inside. We're always trying to find activities to do with the kids, but you know from nowadays, it's like 3-4 times a week we're going out. We're just walking around, and that's like, we're like, okay, what are we going to do for Jackson's birthday? What are we going to do? And how much are we going to put away in the 401k this month? Like everything gets discussed on those walks. It's really funny.
That's great. Nice to have that.
I have to also ask Arthur, you are
Yes,
very committed to a nonprofit.
I sure am. I thank you
Good.
for bringing that up.
Let's talk about that a second.
So I am on the board for about 2.5 years now of the Long Island Coalition Against Bullying. It is a nonprofit organization that has been in existence for almost 12 years now that is committed to anti-bullying efforts in all of the schools on Long Island. And the founder, his name is Joe Salamone, is a wonderful human being, and he himself was a victim of bullying growing up, and he has created this organization from literally nothing to go and do several things. One thing the organization does is help support families, the kids who suffer from bullying, the family members, to help them find support, find therapists. We provide care packages, so we call them smile packages, to kids when they call into the service and they say they're being bullied, and our part of our donations go to making sure that a kid gets, even if it's like a video game, just something so that they could feel better and hopefully mitigate that depression and all that anxiety. Another big part of what we do as an organization is going out to schools and educating both the students about bullying and the problems and issues and the drawbacks, and obviously how not to deal with bullies, how to deal with bullies and how to stop bullying and the importance of it. And also the educators and the administrators of those schools. We have been contracted by dozens at this point of a couple of dozen of school districts on the island, and some of which were in all of the buildings, the elementary, middle school, and high schools of those districts, educating the principals, the assistant principals, and the teachers on, hey, here's the law in New York State. Here's your regulations. Here's what you're supposed to be doing. And from what we can tell, you're not. And you could be having a civil rights lawsuit on your hands if you don't do this. And so, we've kind of looked at it from a holistic perspective of, when you try to stop bullying today, and cyberbullying is such a big issue, obviously, too, it can't just come from telling the kids not to do it. And it can't just come from trying to teach parents not to do it, although that's probably the most important place. You also have to really educate the educators and making sure that they know what their role is. And so I was bullied as a kid. I had to switch schools when I was in middle school. I went from public school to Catholic school because I was bullied so badly. I was so depressed. I was in therapy for years. And as a 12, 13, 14-year-old, that was really a really rough time in my life. And, I don't mind saying this, but I am lucky to be here after those times in my life. There was times I wasn't sure I'd still be alive after those episodes. And so if it caused that in me, I know it causes it in a lot of other kids today. And I think it's one of the worst things that kids have to go through. And so I can't help but want to support the organization and make sure that, hey, listen, anti-bullying today, especially with cyberbullying, is even more important, because the biggest issue today, kids can't go home and get away from it. It is omnipresent in their lives 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, inside of a school building and outside of it. And so it's more important now than it ever has been to really, really try to mitigate bullying.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you, Arthur.
Yeah. It's
the work you're doing with them.
It's, I had a friend, a colleague who is an attorney who I've known for years. She is one of the board of trustees, and she introduced me to Joe, and well, the three of us kind of became good friends. And within a year or so of me knowing Joe, he's like, you got to come on the board. You seem like the right kind of person. And he didn't even know about my history and my personal story until after he basically had brought me out to dinner with him and my colleague Kara. The two of them brought me out to dinner one night to basically tell me, hey, listen, you're going to get voted in. Like, we know everybody this, we vetted you, you're good. But we have to officially on paper do this as a vetting, interview. And that's when I told him the story. And I said, listen, I was, when I was 13, I was like so depressed. I was bullied. I said, this is a personal to me. And he like had no idea. And so like that just, that made it even more, more important to him. And we do a lot of fundraising. We do a lot of events throughout the year. I have no problem writing a big check to our golf outing every year. Like, I don't care. It's got to do what we got to do to support this cause. Cause it's, kids are vulnerable, and that time in a child's life and a teenager's life and adolescence is hard enough. And this, you can't make it harder. And we just have to stop it. We really do.
So how do people find the organization, Arthur?
You can go to LICAB, LICAB.org, the Long Island Coalition Against Bullying, at LICAB on, I think, every social media platform, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. So we're everywhere. We have a golf outing coming up later in the month. We take, obviously take donations at all times throughout the year. Every dollar that you donate goes to supporting the organization. It's to either make sure that we can get more resources in to help us support us so that we can get into more buildings and speak to more kids and get in front of more eyes and ears, because that's really what's important. That's a big part of what we do. And so LICAB.org, any help that anybody out there, wants to do, that would be great. And if they, reach out to me, if you want to know more, it's on my LinkedIn to find out more about our organization and what we do.
That's great. We're also it'll be in the text and in our description and comments when we end the episode. So thank you.
Well, thank you.
This has been so good to have you and learn a little bit more about you, things I didn't know. And no doubt our listeners have gotten to know you and where your heart is in the work you do and in your spare time, and you're still giving back.
Don't know how else not to live. I keep saying that, but it's true. And thank you for having me, and, having another platform to share not just who I am and what I do, organizations I'm a part of and what my business is all about. And hopefully maybe it helps another person change something about the way they run their business, or inspires them to start their own business. And it doesn't matter what it is. I always say to anyone who's thinking about going out on their own, whether it's a lawyer, an accountant, any type of advisor, real estate agent, if it's something you're passionate about and you want to have your own culture, like you said, Bruce, and you want to do it your way, not because you think you're right and everybody else is wrong, but because you think the way you want to do it is treating human beings and other people the best way to do it. And it feels good in here in your heart. That is, the motivation. That's when it's time to become your own boss, become your own source of income, because I could never go back. Not at this point.
So Arthur, how do people get in touch with you?
You can always call our law firm, Hill Conte Law, 631-623-2300. Our website is hillcontelaw.com, spelled HYLCONTE law.com. You can always find us on any social media platform at Hill Conte Law. You can always find me. I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, everywhere. I'm everywhere. And you could always email me even at arthur@hillcontelaw.com. I always answer as quickly, and as whatever I could do to help, I'd be willing to help anybody out there.
Great. It was a pleasure having you, Arthur.
Thanks for having me, guys.